Dr. Peterson, last year we had the contaminated beef recall, which also had a crippling effect, I think, on many small firms. In this particular case, it was the Humane Society, not FSIS, that alerted the public to the violations, which led to the recall. How did FSIS miss these violations, and what specific tests have you taken to ensure that this does not happen again?
Okay, thank you. Well, the situation you mentioned at the Hallmark facility in Chino, California, where we saw a video of just outrageous treatment of cattle at a slaughter plant, and it was quite troubling, certainly for me, that occurred at a federally inspected slaughter plant. Certainly was troubling to Congress and obviously the public. And you asked the right question: how did this happen? I thought you were there every single day. And we've done some investigation. The Office of Inspector General actually did a follow-up investigation, and they had a couple observations. And one was that there were deliberate actions by that firm to bypass inspection, and that is still the subject of some investigation. They also found that there was some noncompliance by my inspectors with them executing their required inspection procedures. We thought at the time, and we had no reason to believe at the time, that was anything other than an isolated event. And the OIG report from this past November did say, and basically quoting, that the events at the Hallmark facility were not evidence of a systematic failure of the inspection procedures. It was a constellation of very, very bad events that occurred in that particular facility. And we've implemented several things, actually quite a few things, some of which from OIG and some of which we initiated in advance of their report. We looked at how did my supervisory structure allow some of my inspection behaviors to occur. They should have been tracking these employees on a more close basis, particularly my veterinarian in that particular plant. That veterinarian supervisor should have had a better understanding of what they were doing. So we introduced a new layer of, not a new layer, but a new level of structure, organization to how they assess the performance of those veterinarians and inspectors on an ongoing basis. Structure where it's documented and other people in the supervisory chain, including myself, can follow up and see what is happening, and that's all populated in a management control system. Then we looked at training. Training of the workforce. Had we really trained the workforce to identify some of the low-level behaviors at the Chino plant, I think if they'd identified some of those behaviors by the plant early on, then they would not have gotten to this egregious activity, you know. And if we introduce the regulatory sanctions earlier, then obviously the point of that is to deter behavior. And so we've reinforced our training, pushed that out, as well as reinforced the accountability for enforcing inhumane activity at slaughter plants. And last year we did quite more rigorously enforce inhumane handling at a variety of slaughter plants across the country. But that plant, I think, is not typical of the industry, and we recognize that, but it is typical of a very, very significant problem. The recall was massive, as you suggested. It's the largest recall we've ever had. It was really not a safety-related recall. It was that as I mentioned, proper inspections were not done because the plant had found a way to bypass those inspections. So the food was, it was recalled because of a regulatory violation. The product has to be inspected, and in that case, on certain days, it was not. That recall went all the way down the food chain, including to a variety of school lunch programs. And many small businesses were affected. It's surprising how product coming out of one plant can touch many, many businesses. But it was important, we felt, and obviously we looked at the scope of the recall and looked at was there ways to mitigate it, and we at the end of the day did feel that the scope of that recall, as massive as it was the right thing to do for the public, in spite of the consequences. And so we did get a lot of that product back, but it did have a significant impact on a variety of retailers, small firms, school lunch programs. And my goal is, with these new measures we put in place, that we will not see anything nearly as sweeping as that in the future.
Any idea what the cost of that recall was?
Well, the cause.
No, cost.
Oh, the cost. No, but it's 143 million pounds. That dwarfs any other recall we've ever done. Well over 10,000 businesses and stores were affected. I don't have a cost on it, no.
I don't think any of us ever will, but this is, I think, the issue we're trying to look at here today is how can we prevent these massive recalls from happening. I think we're always going to have some incidents of a recall, but how can we prevent these massive recalls? So what you have in place right now you think will help to prevent this kind of a massive recall?
Well, we're not going to stand still. We think what we put in place mitigates and goes a little bit beyond what occurred, and obviously we're transposing that to all of the other facilities that we regulate, and then following up in a more timely manner with folks to make sure that they're doing what you and others expect them to be doing.